Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time for a follow-up video to one I did about a month or so ago, where instead of taking a look at the biggest title winning margins in each of Europe's top 15 leagues as per UEFA's coefficient rankings, as I did last time out, I'm going to flip that concept on its head and take a look at the closest title winning margins in those 15 leagues. It is worth pointing out that the UEFA coefficient rankings have actually changed since I did that video, and Norway's Eliteserien has been replaced by the Ukrainian Premier League, but just for consistency purposes, I'm going to stick with the same 15 leagues that I covered in my previous video, which, if you haven't watched it, will be on the end screen of this video, or potentially linked in the description if I can actually remember to put it there. Like last time, I'm only looking at the league seasons in which the leagues in question use the 3 points for a win system rather than the 2 points for a win system, just because A, it makes it easy for me to research, and B, I don't need to do a load of unnecessary maths, and also, if there are any ties involved in any of the countries in question, the team that will feature is the one who accrued the most points in their respective league winning season. I hope that all makes sense, and if you're going to enjoy this video, of course, please don't forget, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. But without any further ado, let's have a look at the closest title winning margins in each of Europe's top 15 leagues and the stories behind them. Eliteserien, Rosenborg, 12 goals scored. We begin, as implied earlier, with the Eliteserien of Norway, and the first of two cases in which a league title was determined by goals scored that will feature in this video. Heading into the final two fixtures of the 2004 season, Rosenborg and Vålerenga were tied on 42 points and 14 goal difference, and with both teams due to face a relegation candidate and the side challenging for the European places, it really was anyone's guess as to who would emerge victorious. In the penultimate round, they beat both their respective opponents 1-0, keeping them separated by goals scored alone, in which Rosenborg had the upper hand. On the final day, Rosenborg were winning 3-1 and Vålerenga 1-0 as both games headed into the last 10 minutes, meaning the former were ahead by just +1 goal difference. However, two Vålerenga goals in the space of just a minute swung the pendulum in their favour, and it looked as though Rosenborg's run of 12 straight league titles wouldn't extend to 13. But in the 89th minute, Rosenborg's Frode Johnson completed his hat-trick to shatter Vålerenga hearts and see the trophy head to Trondheim once again, as Rosenborg had scored 52 goals compared to their rivals' tally of 40. Vålerenga would have to wait until the following year to lift the 5th league crown in their history. Fortuna Liga, Victoria Pilsen, 1 point. There have been 4 occasions where a Czech team has won the league title by a solitary point, with Sparta Prague having done so twice and Slovan Liberec once, but Victoria Pilsen's haul of 69 points in the 2010-11 season was more than any of those teams managed in their respective title-winning seasons. Pilsen have become the dominant force in the Czech game over the last decade or so, with 6 titles to their name since 2011, and they've only finished outside of the top 2 twice and the top 3 once in that time. However, their title success in 2010-11, the focus of this segment, was the first in their entire history, and they clinched it with a game to spare after beating Baník Ostrava 3-1 at home. With their players seemingly already on holiday, they lost their final game 3-1 to Sigma Olomouc, meaning that Sparta Prague's ultimately immaterial victory over Hradec Králové saw them finish just 1 point behind the champions. Swiss Super League, FC Zurich, 5 goal difference. The saddest inclusion in this entire video takes us to Switzerland, where, in the 2005-06 season, the two contenders for the title, Zurich and Basel, met on the final day of the season. Both sides had won their previous 3 games, but Basel, the home team, just needed a draw to make it a hat-trick of league titles, so Zurich had to win to overtake them. Zurich took the lead on the half-hour mark, but Mladen Petric's second-half equaliser looked to have saved Basel from a final day meltdown. But with quite literally the last kick of the game, defender Julian Filipescu fired the ball past the Basel goalkeeper to snatch the title away from their hosts. Understandably, this led to wild celebrations amongst the visiting party, but they were cut drastically short as just 30 seconds after the final whistle, Basel Ultras stormed the pitch and began attacking the Zurich players, with Filipescu the primary target. The police were called into action, the players themselves started retaliating against the supporters, and the Zurich fans even started getting involved in the melee, which would continue long into the night. The trophy ceremony had to be held in the stands owing to the supporters still occupying the pitch, and when the dust settled, there were 115 injuries recorded, with 15 hospitalizations, although mercifully, no one was killed. Basel were fined 80,000 Swiss francs and forced to play their first 2 home matches the following season behind closed doors, and it led to a review on security procedures for the upcoming Euro 2008 tournament, which was due to be co-hosted by Switzerland and Austria. Super League, Besiktas, 1 goal difference. The 2020-21 season was an odd one for Turkish football, with 21 teams taking part in the Super League, as a result of promotion from the second tier still going ahead, but relegation being cancelled in 2019-20, meaning that every week, one team would have to sit out. Thankfully, both Galatasaray and Besiktas, the teams competing for the title that season, were in action on the final day, so there wasn't any risk of either team getting an unfair advantage over the other. The team who held a fair advantage at that point was Besiktas, with a better goal difference and more goals scored, and since they won their last match 2-1 against Göztepe, Galatasaray had to win by 4 goals in order to overtake them right at the last. Unsurprisingly, it proved a bridge too far, as despite scoring 3 second-half goals to earn a 3-1 comeback win against Yeni Malatyaspor, it wasn't enough. A plus 45 goal difference compared to a plus 44 goal difference, and 89 goals scored to 80, meant Besiktas emerged with their 16th Super League title, and their first since 2017. 2 other Super League titles have been decided by goal difference alone, namely Galatasaray's 1992-93 success by 8 goal difference, and Fenerbahce's controversial 2010-11 title win by 4 goal difference ahead of Trabzonspor, which was shrouded in multiple match-fixing allegations. Serbian Superliga. Red Star Belgrade, 1 point. There was a 24-point chasm between first place Red Star and third place Jagodina come the end of the 2013-14 season, but just 1 point separated 2 of the fiercest rivals in football, namely Red Star and Partizan, making it the closest title race in Serbian football history. Red Star put themselves in a great position thanks to a 15-game winning streak from November to April and just 1 defeat in their previous 21 games, although that defeat was against Partizan. That result had well and truly kept Partizan in the race for the title, and they had to beat Kuchkaricki and hope Red Star lost to Vojvodina to leapfrog them at the top, owing to having a superior goal difference. They comfortably beat their opponents 2-0, but despite Vojvodina equalising in the 75th minute to make the score 3-3, they couldn't find a winning goal, meaning Red Star ended their eternal rivals' run of 6 straight Serbian Superliga titles by not quite the narrowest of margins, as this video illustrates, but a very narrow margin nonetheless. Österreichische Bundesliga, LP Salzburg, 1 point. By 2009, it was pretty clear that Red Bull's investment in SV Austria Salzburg, and subsequent rebranding of the team as RB Salzburg, was starting to reap its benefits, and that they would become the dominant team in Austria for years to come. They won the league by 19 points in 2006-07 and picked up another crown in 2008-09, but 2009-10 was the closest they have been pushed out of any of their 13 titles to date. Salzburg lost to their title rivals Austria Wien on the penultimate match day, leaving them just 1 point ahead of Wien and needing a win to guarantee their 3rd league title since the rebranding. They did just that, beating Sturm Graz 2-0, meaning Austria Wien's 3-1 victory over SV Ried mattered little, although had Salzburg and Austria Wien both lost, Rapid Wien, who finished just 3 points behind first place Salzburg and had a better goal difference than them, would have emerged as champions. Since then, RB Salzburg have only failed to win the league title twice, currently on a 9-season title winning streak, and they sit atop the Österreichische Bundesliga once more, heading into the 2022-23 championship round. Scottish Premier League, Rangers, 1 goal difference. Admittedly, I haven't done the required research into what I'm about to say, but I would hazard a guess that around 70% of Scottish Premier League seasons have seen both Celtic and Rangers finish in the top 2. The closest race between the two in the 3 points for a win era came in 2002-03, when, heading into the final match day, both sides had 94 points and were level on goal difference, with Rangers marginally ahead on 95 goals to Celtic's 94. The Gers would play at home against Dunfermline, while Celtic would travel to Kilmarnock, needing to better their fierce rivals' result. But even though they ended up thrashing their hosts 4-0, Rangers went one better, annihilating their visitors 6-1 to pick up their 50th Scottish League crown in style. As an added bit of context, there were 34 points separating Rangers, and Celtic of course, from 3rd place Hearts, emphasising the superiority of those two during that era, and indeed throughout most of Scottish football history. Belgian Pro League, Standard Liège, playoff. The Belgian Pro League works a little bit differently from other major European leagues, in that the determining factor in the event of a tie is matches won over the course of a season rather than goal difference, goals scored, or head-to-head record. Whilst those factors have now been introduced as tiebreakers should 2 teams be tied on points and wins, they were only implemented in the 2009-10 campaign, presumably as a result of what happened the season prior. Reigning champions Standard Liège and Anderlecht both won their final games of the season to finish dead even on 77 points and 24 wins apiece. But even though Anderlecht had a better goal difference, had scored more goals, and led 5-4 in the head-to-head record between the two, a two-legged playoff was arranged to determine the league champions for that year. The first leg ended in a 1-1 draw in Anderlecht, and Standard made home advantage count in the second leg, winning 1-0 thanks to a 40th minute penalty from Axel Witsel, thus lifting their 10th, and to date last, Belgian Pro League title. I thought I'd also mention that Ghent won the 2010-11 league title by half a point ahead of Standard Liège, which must be the only time in European top flight history that such a title-winning margin has ever been recorded. Primeira Liga, Porto, 1 point. Both Boavista in 2000-2001 and Porto in 2006-07 won the Primeira Liga by 1 point, but their points hauls of 77 and 69 were fewer than Porto managed in 2012-13, when they amassed 78, so that season, and indeed that team, is the one to feature. In 2010-11, Porto won the Primeira Liga by a record 22 points as part of a continental treble alongside the Portuguese Cup and the Europa League. But just 2 years on, and with many of their star players having left, including Falcao and Hulk, the gap had narrowed significantly to just 1 point. Nonetheless, it would still be Porto who would come out on top ahead of Benfica, completing a hat-trick of Primeira Liga titles in the process. In fairness to them, they would go the entire league campaign unbeaten again, just as they did in 2010-11, winning 24 games and drawing the other 6, although Benfica themselves only lost once all season. But that defeat, crucially, came against Porto. Without that defeat, Benfica would have also gone unbeaten all season and won the league. Talk about fine margins. Eredivisie, PSV, 1 goal difference. One of the most enthralling title races in recent memory came in the Netherlands in 2006-07, when the three contenders, AZ, Ajax and PSV, were all tied on 72 points heading into the final game of the season, with AZ leading the way by virtue of a better goal difference than the other two. However, they would suffer a shock defeat to relegation-threatened Excelsior on the final day, ruling them out of the running and denying them the chance to win only the second league title in their history. As such, as it so often does in the Netherlands, it came down to Ajax and PSV, with the former edging it in terms of goal difference and having scored 13 more goals. PSV led 2-1 after 13 minutes in their clash with Vitesse before Ajax took the lead 18 minutes into their game against Willem II. But the Eindhoven side then scored 2 more in the second half to put themselves in the driving seat once more. However, Klaas-Jan Huntelaar's 68th minute goal for the Amsterdam outfit put them back ahead on goals scored, meaning PSV needed to find just 1 more goal from anywhere. They got it through club hero Philip Cocu, playing his final game for the club at the age of 36, who smashed home the 5th and decisive strike in the 77th minute, and Ajax couldn't find another in the time that remained. The Eindhoven club had gained their 20th league title by the skin of their teeth. Ligue 1, Lens, 5 goal difference. When Lille shocked the footballing world 2 years ago by beating Moneybags PSG to the Ligue 1 title, they finished just 1 point ahead of the Parisians, but it still wasn't enough to overtake Lens's record in France of a title win by 5 goal difference, which they set in 1997-98. During the 1990s, French football was an extremely open field, with 7 different teams winning Ligue 1, or Division 1 as it was known back then, including Auxerre, PSG, Bordeaux, Nantes, and, of course, Lens. They managed to sneak in ahead of second place Metz, who themselves achieved their highest ever top flight finish in the process by virtue of having a plus 25 goal difference in comparison to Metz's plus 20, despite only mustering a draw on the final day of the season against Auxerre. However, because of that result, Metz needed to beat Lyon by 7 goals to complete a seemingly implausible turnaround. And, unsurprisingly, they couldn't manage it, only winning 1-0 to hand Lens their only French league title in their entire history. Serie A, Juventus, 1 point. The Serie A title has been won by a 1-point margin on 4 occasions since the 3 points for a win system was introduced in Italy in 1995-96, and curiously, 3 of them were won by Juventus. The most recent of which, and the one which features owing to them achieving a higher points per game average than the others, came in 2019-20, when a resurgent Inter Milan under the guidance of Antonio Conte, who would win Serie A the following year, pushed them all the way. By that stage, it was quite obvious that cracks were starting to appear in the hitherto indomitable force of Italian football, as despite winning 9 league titles in a row, a series of poor transfers, financial mismanagement, an ageing squad, and an overriding focus on winning the Champions League led to a decline in quality on the pitch under Maurizio Sarri. They lost 7 games in the league and were knocked out in the round of 16 of the Champions League by Lyon, despite boasting Cristiano Ronaldo in their ranks, leading to Sarri being dismissed after just a season in charge following their Champions League exit. I think it's fair to say that things haven't really improved in the years since, as they finished 4th in 2020-21 and 2021-22, and were hit with a 15-point deduction earlier this year owing to their financial indiscretions, a series of events which saw the entire Juventus board and the club's chairman resign. Another Serie A title looks a long way away right now. Bundesliga, Bayern Munich, 7-goal difference. I thought for sure the answer to this would be Bayern's last-minute success in 2000-2001, when they scored a last-minute equaliser against Hamburg to pip Schalke, whose match had finished 5 minutes earlier with them as champions, by a single point. However, they had an even closer title win just a year prior to that, and on that occasion, they didn't hold the upper hand going into the final game, as Bayer Leverkusen sat 3 points ahead of them, albeit with an inferior goal difference. This meant that a Leverkusen loss and a Bayern win would see the Bavarians pick up yet another league title, and in true Wieserkusen, or Neverkusen style, they were stunned 2-0 by 10th place Unterhaching. Smelling blood, as they so often tend to do, Bayern comfortably overcame Werder Bremen with a 3-1 win at home to win their 15th Bundesliga title. It's not entirely unfeasible that the current Bundesliga campaign could also be decided by goal difference, with Borussia Dortmund 1 point ahead of Bayern as of the time of this recording, albeit the Bavarians have a 21 goal difference advantage over their Classico rivals, and they've just appointed former Dortmund manager Thomas Tuchel in an attempt to return them to the summit of German football. La Liga, Real Madrid, head-to-head record. A few leagues across the world decide their league titles on head-to-head record between the two teams in question in the event of a tie, and the most notable of them is Spain's La Liga. As far as I'm aware, this tiebreaker has only had to be used once, namely in 2006-07, when Real Madrid emerged victorious over a Barcelona side who had won La Liga and the Champions League the previous campaign. Indeed, the Catalans held the advantage when it came to goals scored and goal difference, but their failure to beat Real in the league came back to bite them hard. Madrid won 2-0 at the Bernabeu and drew 3-3 at the Camp Nou, meaning that with 4 points in the fixtures between the two, they gained Spanish supremacy once more ahead of their rivals. The next year, the gap between the two would widen significantly, with Real finishing 18 points ahead of Barcelona, who decided to appoint Pep Guardiola as manager as a replacement for Frank Rijkaard because of this humiliation. And the rest, as they say, is history. Premier League, Arsenal, 8 goals scored. I promised you another title that was settled on goals scored, and we get it in our final inclusion for this video, meaning that Manchester City's last gasp title success in 2011-12 on goal difference ahead of Manchester United still wasn't close enough to warrant an inclusion. The 1988-89 season had been a dark one for Liverpool owing to the Hillsborough disaster in April that year, an event which saw 97 fans lose their lives. But even with that tragedy, they were the frontrunners in a title race with Arsenal that came down to the final straight. Coincidentally enough, those two would meet on the last day of the season in a straight shootout for the league crown, with Liverpool only needing a draw and Arsenal having to win by 2 clear goals to overtake the Reds on goals scored. Alan Smith put the Gunners ahead early on in the second half with a controversial header, as had he not got the faintest of touches on the ball from the indirect free kick that assisted him, the goal would have been ruled out. Wave after wave of attacks from both sides followed, but the score remained 1-0 heading into the final stages, meaning that as things stood, Liverpool will win the league on goal difference. However, Arsenal launched one final attack with just over a minute of injury time left when Michael Thomas was put through on goal, and as ITV commentator Brian Moore shouted the immortal words of "and it's up for grabs now," the Arsenal midfielder slotted the ball past Bruce Grobbelaar to seize the title away from the Reds right at the last. It's the only time in English top flight history that the title has been settled on a goal scored basis, and I doubt we'll ever see a closer title race in English football, but I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. And that just about wraps up today's video looking at the closest title winning margins in each of Europe's top 15 leagues. If you enjoyed this video, of course, please don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, let me know your thoughts on those stories and any other video ideas you might have for me or something like that down in the comments below, and of course feel free to check out my video I did on the biggest title winning margins in each of Europe's top 15 leagues, which should be on your screen about here or so if I can format the end screen how I want to. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.